Hi, everyone. I hope you are doing well and welcome to week 9. So congratulations on being over halfway done with the course. I feel like we're really downhill from here in terms of learning new content. We have a few more things to learn, but it's really going to be a lot of application from this point on in the rest of the semester. So mostly today, I'm going to talk a lot about the article critique assignment that is coming up due October 25th. I'm going to talk to you about that, show you where to find it, go over the example with you, and give you some tips and tricks to help you as you are doing that assignment. I'm also going to be going over some of the most commonly missed questions from the midterm, just to review some of those topics, and then leave you with your checklist for the week. Okay, so the article critique assignment. So the article critique assignment is something that you should start working on this week. This week, it will go along with our readings because we are finishing up quantitative design. So this week, you are going to be reading about how to analyze quantitative design with those statistical tests that researchers use when they are doing the hypothesis testing. So along with this, I want you to go ahead and get started with your article critique assignment. We have 2 article critique assignments this semester. They're each worth 10 points. And the first one is about quantitative design. So most of you have already selected your article. If you haven't, go ahead and do that so I can make you your assignment as soon as possible. I do make those individually, so it might take a few minutes once you go ahead and complete the survey, but I will get to that as soon as I can if you haven't yet done the survey. So it is in Perusal where you will complete the article critique assignment. Now, there is a link on iCollege that will take you to the Perusal, just like we always do. Or if you want to look for it, you can go to in your Perusal, you can click right here where it says course home on the left. And then you will see assignments right here. When you click on assignments, you can you can scroll back and see all of the previous assignments that we've already done in Perusal. So that can always be helpful if you need to look back or study anything that we've already done. And then you will see the article critique assignment. Now, you will see 2. The first one is the sample. So it will say sample article critique. You don't need to do anything there, and you shouldn't put any annotations there. This is for you to look at an example. I'm going to go over that with you today. Then you will see article critique number 1, quantitative design. Now this one is just for you. So this is going to be a little bit different from our other perusals because you won't see anyone else's annotations. This is an independent assignment that you'll be doing. So you'll see the article that you chose, and this is where you will put your annotations. So what I'm looking for, we're going to go back to chapter 4. Chapter 4 was about how to critically evaluate research. And so in chapter 4, they gave you a checklist for evaluating quantitative studies and qualitative. So since we're doing quantitative studies, we're going to be using table 4.2 to guide us. So this is a checklist that you can use as you are reading to help give you ideas about what you should be making your annotations about. Now, as you can see on the checklist, there's like 28 suggestions here. I'm not looking for you to answer every single question. And some of the questions might not be applicable to every study that everyone chose. So you're not answering all of these questions, but this is a guide to help you, give you some ideas about what you could be looking for. So some things that you're looking for, and the big thing that I want you to focus on is applying, making connections to what we've already learned. So if it is an example of sampling that we learned about in class, make an annotation and talk about that. So there might be, and there likely will be, components of design or theories or other details in the study that are outside of the scope of what we've learned about in this class. That's okay. I don't expect you to comment on those or have a sophisticated understanding on those. I'm really focused on getting you into the practice of reading educational research and identifying and talking about the things that we've already read about. So as far as the introduction, so looking at the introduction, what is the topic of the research? What is their problem or the purpose that they are doing? So we talked a lot about the different research purposes for quantitative design. Are they looking for the relationship between variables? Are they looking for correlations? Are they trying to describe, explain, predict? What is their purpose? What are the research questions? That's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about, and that's something that you're doing in your research proposal too. What are the research questions? Now, since we're all doing quantitative design, you should also be able to talk about their variables. You can talk about what the variables are. Are they numerical variables? Are they categorical variables? And then what is their hypothesis? Is it stated? And then as far as the method, so participants, that's something that we talked about, is sampling. Who are the participants there that they are including in the study? How are they selecting the participants or sampling the participants? What are the demographics of participants that they are including? And then were there enough participants? Then also to going on to research instruments. Are they using a survey? Are they using a test? Are they using maybe several different types of tests? Are they using existing data that already existed? What are their data sources and what are their research instruments that they are using? And then as far as the design, so we just spent several weeks reading about experimental design, quasi-experimental design, non-experimental design. What can you comment about the design? And then examples of bias, that's something that we've talked about. And then ethics, what have the researchers done to protect their participants and to maintain high ethical standards? Then as far as the results, so you can make a comment about how data were analyzed. So since they're all quantitative design, you should expect to see statistical analysis. So you can mention that as an annotation. You can talk about the statistical test that the researchers used. And that's okay if you don't know how to perform that statistical test. Maybe they did a t-test, maybe they did a regression. You'll comment that and explain why they did it. Then you'll talk about their discussion. Then we've also talked a lot about reliability and validity. What are the researchers saying about that? What are they not saying about that? Discussion of their findings. Is there evidence to support the conclusions that they're drawing? And then your final evaluation. So again, this is just some ideas to guide your thinking as you are going through your paper and reviewing that research. So what I'm looking for, like I mentioned, it's 10 points. So I'm looking for at least 10 annotations across the article. So when we do our weekly perusals, I'm looking for 4 to 6 annotations. This one is more because this one is worth 10 points. So you might have a couple annotations in the introduction, a couple about maybe one about the research question, several annotations in the method. That's where the bulk of your annotations will be, maybe 1 to 2 in the results, and then your final evaluation of the study. So you can incorporate items from the checklist. Oh, I skipped one. Each annotation to be 3 to 6 sentences long. So you're not just putting an annotation to say, this is the research purpose. You need to actually discuss it. And I'll show you an example in a moment. And then make connections to the course content. So this is an example of what an annotation might look like to talk about the research purpose. So let's go to perusal so you can see what it looks like. So if you want to see the sample, when you click right here in perusal, sample article critique, it will take you to perusal. So, and I just kind of showed you an example. So let's say that you are open to a perusal. You can click over here on the left where it says course home. And then at the top, you will have library, and then you'll have assignments. And when you scroll through assignments, you can see everything that we've done so far, perusal 1 all the way through perusal 8 and 9 that we are starting this week. And then you will see sample article critique. This is the sample. So again, you're not putting any annotations here. This is for you to see an example of what I'm looking for with this assignment. So let's go ahead and take a look at this assignment. So this article is an article that I talked about in last week's lecture about the achievement gap data and the narrative around that, and a counter story about the racial achievement gap. So when you see over here, you will see that it's only my annotations. And you can see I have more than 10 here, but this is to give you an idea of what I'm looking for. So the first annotation that I put is about the research purpose. So you can see in the study, when you read through the paper, and so since we have about a week and a half to do this, I would suggest that you start first orienting yourself with the study and the different parts of the study. Many of them have similar headings to help you focus in on what you're looking for. So of course, you'll see the title here, you'll see the journal where it was published, and then the authors and their institutional affiliation. And then this is what we call the abstract. We read about that when we read about parts of a research proposal. So the abstract is giving you a high-level overview of the study, keywords. Then you will expect to see a little introduction. This is talking about the research problem or the research issue. And when you're going through this research or this article critique assignment, this is also going to help you with your research proposal, because you're going to get an idea for what kind of things that researchers are including in what we call the front matter of their study, their introduction, where they're talking about the purpose and the research problem, the research questions, and so on. So you can see in this study, they have a section called purpose. Now, this is not that common. It's more than likely your study will not say purpose, but there will be a portion of your study that talks about what their purpose was or why they're doing it or what they hope to find out. So you can see here that I put an annotation about the purpose. I'm sure that this is kind of blocked by my Zoom window, but again, you have access to this so you can see it. But I said the purpose of this research is to carry out a quantitative study to add to scholars' understandings of the achievement gap. I mentioned it's confirmatory in nature. So again, see how I'm making connections back to the course content. You can use the text to help you, the lecture videos, in that it seeks to confirm a hypothesis about the achievement gap. I said it's also an example of orientational research, going back to even chapter 1 about the different types of research: basic, applied, orientational. It's carried out from a critical lens that seeks to dismantle inequitable power distributions related to racism in U.S. educational systems. The researchers make clear that their purpose is to complexify educational literature describing achievement gaps between Black and white students by providing evidence that these gaps are nuanced and contextually laden. And I have a spelling error here, our usual, complexify. There we go. So that's just one annotation talking about the research purpose. So again, I'm making connections to what the authors are saying, but then giving my own critique, my own analysis, kind of like a review. Like if you were writing up a review of a book or a movie, anything like that. That's what we're looking for here. I have another annotation. I skipped that one. I have another annotation about the research purpose. I said the authors do a nice job in first providing a broad overview and the potential impact of the study. So that's okay if you have two annotations, both about research purpose, because you can see they're saying something different. My next one is, again, about the research purpose. As I was reading along, I found this, and then also about the research questions. So you can see here that we have the research question there as well, an annotation about that. Okay, so in the beginning, you are going to expect to see the research purpose, the variables, since they're all quantitative studies. You might see their hypothesis that they have. And then you will often see a section called significance or theory. So you can see here that there is a section about like the significance. I didn't make an annotation here, but you could talk about the potential significance of the study and your thoughts about that. So when you are making these annotations, you're both summarizing and then giving your own commentary about that portion of the research. The next one is about theory. So I mentioned the theory that they used. Now, our class is not focused on theory, so I don't expect you to give detailed commentary on the theory other than stating what it is. Instead, I want you focused on the research design. Okay, so you can see the literature review section is up next. So in the literature review, this is where authors will be talking about prior research that is about their topic. And this can also help give you an idea because we are going to be including this in our research proposal as well. The studies that you're reading will probably consult between 10 to 30 plus articles. We're just consulting between 3 to 5 for hours, but it'll give you an idea of how this looks in a published article. So here you can see in this comment, or if it's being blocked, I apologize. But in the literature review, I summarized the main sections that they included literature about. You might make a comment to say that it was appropriate or you wanted more about something. So then after the literature review, you can see prior methodological scholarship about it. Now, when you are doing your critique, look out for the heading method or methodology, headings that have to do with the method, because this is where the bulk of your analysis for your article critique is going to come. So here under the method section, you can definitely use those headings to orient yourself and then go back and read each section to help make sure that you're understanding the design. That's the goal, is for you to be able to read the article and to be able to comment on the design. So here you can see they have the method, they have a participant section, rationale for sample, how they chose the participants, the sample. More details about the participants, data collection. This is where I should look to find out what data sources did they use, what procedures did they use to collect it. Instruments, this will tell me about the particular test that they used. Limitations to the instrument. Statistical procedures. So this is probably going to be either about how they controlled or how they did data analysis. So some articles will say data analysis. Some of them will say statistical procedures. Here you can see research questions, very explicit, rationale for ranking, findings, limitations. So let's go through some of the annotations that I put in the method section. So first, I mentioned that it's a quantitative study using one quantitative variable or numerical variable, and the dependent variable being well, this is incorrect. The dependent variable being I meant numerical and quantitative. Numerical variable and categorical variable. So that's something to mention on. Is it a numerical variable? Is it a categorical variable? So they have the quantitative variable, the reading scores, and the categorical variable being race. And so I talked about I will have to go back and fix that after. So they talked about the rationale for the sample, the instruments, and the reliability. Okay, so sampling, purposeful sampling that we've read about. And so I gave a discussion of what they were looking for. The participants were all ELL students. They also used a little bit of convenience sampling since they were in the same district. Data collection, talked about using tests to generate the dependent variable, those reading scores. And then I connected that to what we learned about in class, about what that means. That means that they did not give participants the test as part of the study, but they used existing data. And you can see here that in the article, they talked in depth about those details. And then data analysis, you can see a one-way ANOVA is appropriate. And that's what we're reading about this week. So this week, when we do our discussion of statistical analyses and how to analyze quantitative data in quantitative design, you will read about different statistical tests. So pay attention to the types of variables that each test uses. So here you can see I say one-way ANOVA is appropriate because it's comparing a dependent variable and an independent variable. And you can see one of them is numerical, one of them is categorical. I made a mention of internal validity and what they did there, and then their analytic process. So here you can see where I talked about the instruments, coming back to their findings and the research questions, effect size that we're going to be reading about this week too. limitations in the study, about the sample size, and the authors will mention this as well. And so you can talk about what they mentioned there. And then their findings. What were the findings of the study? Ethics, it's always great to talk about the ethical considerations that researchers did or did not do, and then your final evaluation. So this is an example of what you can do when you are doing your article critique. Now, I showed you that you can find your article critique if you go to course home and perusal and assignments. Scroll down, you can see sample, and then you will see the one that I've assigned to you. Or if you are in iCollege, this is week 9 announcements. So this is the video that you're watching right now. The reading for the week, perusal number 9. And then this link is for your personalized assignment for the article critique. And if you haven't done the survey yet, you won't have one yet, but as soon as you do, you can take that there. This is the sample. And then here is the table that you can use to help you with your checklist. So that is how you can complete the article critique assignment. So I do encourage you to get started reading your article throughout this week and just jotting down your notes as you go, and then you can continue to refine your annotations as you go along, working up towards 10 annotations, commenting on the research design of the article that you chose. Okay, so that is the article critique assignment. Please let me know if you have any questions. And even if I know I said don't leave annotations in the sample, but if you have a question there about how to do it, you can ask me that there too. Okay. Okay, so let's go through some of the questions from the midterm that were most commonly missed. I'll start with number 1. Number 1 was from chapter 1 about types of research. So we have evaluation research, basic research, applied research, and then epistemology, which is not a type of research, but rather a branch of philosophy. So in this example, the researcher has conducted several studies to verify the theory. Now, in that first sentence, that tells me that the researcher has already done basic research to verify the theory on motivation. Studies have already validated their theory, so now they want to conduct research to see if changing aspects of the school classroom leads to improvement. So that is why it's an example of applied research. Chapter 8, what I asked you for 3 different examples to compare and contrast or criteria for critically analyzing quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method studies. So this is related to that table that I just showed you for your article critique, table 4.2. There's table 4.2 for quantitative studies in chapter 4, and then table 4.3 for evaluating qualitative studies, also in chapter 4. So for this, I was looking for 3 sentences to compare. For example, the purpose of a quantitative study will be to confirm a hypothesis, whereas the purpose of a qualitative study would be to explore a phenomenon. A second example would be the purpose statement of a quantitative study will state the variables and the hypotheses. Well, the research question will state the variables and the hypotheses, and in a qualitative study, the research questions will be open-ended about the phenomenon at hand. In the data analysis in a quantitative study will include statistical tests, whereas the data analysis in the qualitative study will include coding or looking for patterns. So I wanted you to compare and contrast 3 different parts of a study. What would it look like in quantitative versus qualitative? And this will help you a lot as you move into the article critique and as you move into drafting your proposal. So this is something to be thinking about as you are moving through this later half of the semester. So look at the introduction. What would that be like in a quantitative study what would it be like in a qualitative study. And you might need to look back into chapter 4, especially as you're doing the article critique. That can help you. And then all this will help you with the research proposal project as well. Oh, skip that. Let me go back. Okay. Number 11. Okay, so number 11 was all about how to ensure that your research measurements are valid. So when constructing an instrument to measure the attitudes towards exercise, the researcher had a panel of excerpts examine the items generated to make sure the items adequately represented the domain of interest. This would be an example of. So since the content that they're looking for, they're trying to understand attitudes towards exercise, and they want to make sure that the items on the instrument or the survey were actually measuring this domain of interest or the content. So this would be an example of content-related validity evidence. Let me see if I have that page pulled up. I don't. Okay, so let me show you where this is in the text. Okay, so now I am in chapter 7, all about those research measurements, and this is the validity section. So here you can see that here are the 3 buckets for obtaining evidence for validity. So there's validity based on content, internal structure, and then as it relates to other variables. So this first section is about content-related evidence. It is making sure that the instrument is valid because all of the items are actually measuring the criteria or the content that you're interested in. So that's what they were mentioning in this question 11. Since it was all about exercise, they had the experts come in to ensure that all of the questions were in fact measuring this. So that is content-related evidence validity. So number 18 was about how to control for potentially extraneous variables. Those confounding variables that could be the reason why you are seeing an effect on the dependent variable, but it's not because of the independent variable. So here they have this reading study, and it says that the researcher adjusted their post-test scores because the students in the control classroom scored higher on the pre-test than their peers. So that's why on the post-test, she adjusted it to make sure that the research findings were not just showing that the one classroom scored higher before. So when they are adjusting it, they are using analysis of covariance or a statistical means of controlling for extraneous variables. So it's like statistically leveling the groups to make sure that what you're seeing is in fact because of the independent variable and not just because one group was higher. So this is analysis of covariance, and we're going to be reading a lot about different statistical tests this week. That in addition to what we've already read about statistical tests to control for extraneous variables, how researchers that are using quantitative design use hypothesis testing and statistics to identify if there is a statistically significant relationship between the variables. Okay, so the next one is about stratified random sampling, which one is not true. So stratified random sampling is when you have a method where you have different, you've chunked the population into different chunks, and then you randomly sample within them. So here we see it involves a random selection process from identified subgroups. Yes, that's true. So you identify the subgroups and then you randomly sample. So since that's true, that's not the answer. Proportions of the group in the sample must always match their sample population. Now that is not true because it is okay that the proportions are different based on whatever the source of interest is in the study. And then that kind of goes with this choice here because it's talking about disproportional stratified random sampling is especially helpful when getting a large enough sample of a subgroup is necessary for the design. So this is an appropriate method to have that disproportional stratified sampling if you already know it's going to be hard to get enough of a certain group. So you can block that off and randomly sample within that. So proportions don't have to match the population. And in fact, disproportional random sampling can be a useful strategy. Proportional stratified sampling yields a representative sample, yes. So the only one that is not true, B, is that it must always match their population proportions. Okay, so here is an example. So we have this researcher that is conducting a study about the effectiveness of 2 tutoring programs, has 4 schools. However, one is already using it and will not allow them to randomly assign students. So that is a big theme, a big topic that we've been covering is random assignment. Which type of research would be best for Carl to use? So since they cannot have random assignment, then that's why it would be best to use a quasi-experimental design. Quasi-experimental design is when there's not random assignment, but the researchers have good control over the extraneous variable. So those were the most commonly missed questions. If there's others that you want me to go over, let me know, and I will make another video or send you an email about that. So this last week in perusal, we read about non-experimental design. So now we have experimental, quasi-experimental, and non-experimental. So I encourage you to use this visual and what we've read so far on your article critique assignment. And if you are thinking about doing quantitative design for your research proposal, you can come back to these different terms and comments. Even if the researchers don't mention these concepts, you can use them to talk about what's happening in the study that you're reviewing and why. Okay, and here is your checklist for this week. So this week, by next Sunday, October 22nd, we're going to be reading chapters 18 and 19. Now, chapters 18 and 19 are about data analysis and quantitative design. So they're all about statistics. So chapter 18 is about descriptive statistics. Chapter 19 is about inferential statistics. So if you don't have prior experience with statistics, many of these terms will likely be new to you, and that's okay. I encourage you to focus on the big ideas. Your main goal is to understand that quantitative researchers use statistical analysis to analyze their data, and pay careful attention to the different types of variables and how those relates to the particular statistical test. So you're not expected to be able to do any of the calculations. You're expected to be able to identify what statistical test that they did, what kind of variables it was. And so this will build on what we've done previously with correlation. You'll see some of that in there, and then also inferential statistics. And you can use some of the same language that you read about in your article critique as well. So yes, you can do it. Then we have perusal number 9, which is about statistical analysis. Then you have gave you a little bit of a break, and then your article critique is due the 25th. Now, after we finish the article critique, we're going to turn our attention to our research proposal for our next check-in for that. So I am going to offer an optional Zoom to talk about your research proposals, to prep you for the next check-in that we're going to have for our research proposal. So that is coming up. Yes, and let me know if you have any questions for the article critique or about what you're reading this week in chapters 18 and 19.